Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today I played a great game with my morning coffee where the battle was won in the mid-game. I'm at the stage of my chess learning that I'm often okay out of the opening, but still fairly dodgy in the mid-game. Often it comes down to whether my opponent or I make the most mistakes, or the most critical mistakes. In this game, I entered the endgame up a full piece and clinched the victory. I hope you enjoy. So let's have a quick look at the review. So this is chess.com's algorithm. I did fairly well, I thought, in this game. 81.8% accuracy. Good, good mix of fairly good moves, some mistakes, and one blunder. So managed to do a little bit better than my opponent. But the opponent did have an advantage earlier on, but I was able to come out ahead. I think again in sort of in the middle game. All right, let's have a look at the analysis now. And in this game, I played black, opponent white. The opponent led with e4, responded with e5, and they started with the bishop's opening. Now, in this situation, what I usually do is just to play solidly with the opening. So develop my pieces, try to control the center, develop develop my pawns, maybe castle. So knight to f6 with an attack on the e4 pawn. Opponent defends with d3, and here I have a immediate potential attack on the d5 square. So if I push my pawn to d5, captures, opponent can't capture back without the queen coming ahead. So immediately take the full center, and this is apparently known as the Berlin defense in the bishop's opening. Opponent capture back with the knight. The opponent now brings out the queen, placing extra pressure on that d5 square. I move the pawn forward to c6, giving an extra defender. The opponent now places even more pressure with an extra knight. So bishop to e6. So this is, a square of contention at the moment. But of course, the opponent has their queen out, which is a potential target. The opponent moves their queen to e4, which I wasn't entirely sure why they did that, but I did have a sense that that probably wasn't the most accurate move, and Stockfish seemed to support that. So at this point, I thought, look, I was going to break. I was feeling that, I was feeling the pressure from the center, so I thought, might as well just get rid of that knight. They capture back, damaging their pawn structure. And I thought this was a potential opportunity for me to bring my queen out, putting pressure on that weak f pawn of the opponent's. Opponent develops their knight f3, which is a good move. I bring out my bishop now, defending, giving an extra defender to the e5 square. The opponent has two attackers. Now I have two defenders. Now the opponent brings out another good move, developing their knight to g5 with an attack on the queen. Here I thought a little bit, and I thought, look, the best approach here to maintain the defense and also getting out of the attack was to simply advance my queen to f5, and Stockfish agrees. The opponent is a little bit ahead at this point. They capture the bishop. At this point, I had a think. I thought that I could capture the bishop, but there's still a lot of tension in the center. And at this point, I thought I might as well get rid of the queens, take the queens out of the picture. Queen captures queen. They of course capture back with the pawn, and I felt that this might be better for me. Interestingly, Stockfish disagrees. So substantial advantage for white at the moment, but I was okay. So I captured back with my pawn. So now I have double pawns in the center. Was this a problem? Oh, potentially. There is a sort of a weakness there. A weakness there, but I thought that I would be okay. That for instance, if I castled, I now have an open f file for my rook. The opponent castles long. So now an attack on the bishop. Here I thought, whoops, what am I doing? So that I would have a potential check on the king, and that brings so the opponent now brings their king onto the open B file. And as we'll see, this becomes a positional weakness for white in the mid game. And now this is a point where I lost sight that the bishop used to defend the e5 pawn, and I sort of thought, oh, okay, opportunity to short castles, but of course I left that pawn hanging, which was a mistake. It was a mistake. That did allow me to capture the pawn on f2, which I felt again was powerful for me. Now I did see the opponent might come back by advancing their rook to d8, but I saw that I could just bring my rook all the way back. That in fact actually happened, and interestingly enough, the Stockfish felt that that was a great move. So we end up trading rooks. Apparently, this was a better capture, which I can see because this does bring the rook into the picture. But it allowed me to bring the king to e8, and this actually provides this pattern where you're 2 squares away, directly opposite a knight, does help control the potential positions of the knight. And this position actually ended up being quite important for me in the mid game. The opponent brings out their rook. Now I felt fairly uncomfortable with this. Rook on the seventh rank. Interesting enough, I'm quite ahead here, but only if I saw if I capitalized on that with one good move, which is actually bishop to d6 with an attack on the knight and also potentially the pawn. I did not see that. Here I sort of wondered what I was going to do for a while. I really didn't want to lose this pawn as part of the sort of defense of the king. So I thought I was very clever bringing my bishop all the way back to f8. Obviously pretty happy for that trade. Stockfish hates that move. I noticed, +5. I thought it was okay in the game, but but if you follow the best line for white, they capture here, and I basically end up losing a piece at the end. But the opponent doesn't entirely capitalize on what they need to do. Here I now have some attacks on the bishop. They move the bishop out of the way. Now I see this attack on the knight. It's technically still pretty good for white, and here white starts to make some inaccuracies in the middle game. Here I now have another attack on the bishop. So I felt that if the opponent didn't play very accurately here, there was a good chance that I would be able to capture one of their pieces. And that's what ended up happening. So they sort of pushed their knight out of the way. The challenge here is, I sort of thought, if I capture that bishop, I lose my bishop with check. So obviously that was not a good move. Not to mention the knight also defends that rook, so that knight and rook combination is potentially quite strong. But what I did see was I could now block with the bishop and disconnecting the defense of that knight from that rook. Opponent, I suppose, decides to do a captured one of my pawns rather than just moving it out of the way. The reason why it's an error here is that with the capture of the knight, I still have a potential attack on their bishop. So captures, they capture the other pawn, but now I can move my knight. Now the apparently I give up some of my advantage here. I should have moved the queen out of the way. However, the strategy I saw was I had a potential pin on that king. And what my goal was now that I was a piece up, so I've got 3 pieces versus the opponent's 2, was that I wanted to rapidly trade pieces. And this was a way I could see of forcing a trade of rooks, which would be good for me. The opponent doesn't move their rook out of the way, allowing me to effectively force a rook trade. So very happy with that. Bishop captures bishop, I capture bishop back, and now I enter the end game up a full piece. So the opponent has more pawns, but having the extra knight, I felt that as long as I didn't blunder something, this should be winning for me. And the opponent's king is well out of reach for many of the pawns, particularly on this side of the board. So opponent tries to push their pawns, which makes sense, but they are simply not fast enough. So apparently that wasn't the most accurate move, but my goal was here, look, I can definitely just completely block the advance of that pawn. And with my king being here, I felt I was definitely able to at least get rid of the H pawn, if not the G pawn as well. So here I moved my king, and basically, some of these pawns are, they're toast. Now the opponent was able to defend this pawn, but by pushing these pawns, I effectively form a blockade. It is not possible for the king to cross that blockade, at least not easily. So there we go. And now I have a unstoppable attack on the G pawn. The opponent sees it coming, so allows me to capture, and I think the opponents can see that the only potential chances are to come in this direction. However, again, it really doesn't make much of a difference. So now that's a passed pawn, captures, and now my goal is simply to try to promote the E pawn. Here, I decide just to move that out of the way, protect with the king. No, the opponent is playing valiantly, but from my perspective, this is now unavoidable. So moved my knight to get rid of that piece. This was probably not necessary, but I thought it would just be simpler to get rid of as many of their pawns as possible. And at this point, this is effectively king and queen versus king and pawn. It is not possible to prevent checkmate now. And checkmate. Good game, and it all came down in this game to the mid game. So GG to the opponent. In this game, the opponent didn't punish me for some inaccurate moves, which made all the difference in the end. One of the learnings that I took out of this game is that I need to keep an eye out for hanging pieces and need to be careful with some tunnel vision of a pre-thought series of moves. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.